Welcome back to another deep dive. We sort through some really fascinating sources, pull out the key insights, all for you. Today, we're getting into the story behind 10, a novel by Hank M. Greene. And what's so interesting here is, it was written years ago, but its ideas about AI, they feel incredibly relevant, almost prophetic right now. It's like fiction catching up with reality.
Absolutely. And our mission today is really to unpack where 10 came from. We want to explore its big ideas about AI, about us, humanity, and get this, how the author actually used AI, partnered with it to revise the book, and ultimately figure out why it feels more urgent, more important now than maybe even when it was first written.
Okay, so let's set the stage. We're going to explore this complex relationship, humans and advanced AI, all through the lens of this really captivating story. So with that set, where did 10 actually begin? What was that initial spark?
Yeah, let's go back. It started around 2017, and it began with a pretty fundamental question the author was wrestling with. What happens when AI gets smarter, faster than we can, guide it, control it maybe?
A big question.
Ugh.
And this wasn't just a passing thought for him, right? His interest in AI goes way back.
Oh, way back to childhood, actually. He was apparently really into the Britannica science yearbooks back then. And in one from the 70s, he read this line, this prediction: computers would be to humans as humans are to dogs.
Wow.
Yeah, in terms of raw computing power. Imagine reading that as a kid. It kind of hooked him on the future of tech, didn't scare him off, clearly.
No kidding. So that planted a seed,
Yeah.
and then he actually got into computer science.
Deeply. In the 80s, he was really hands-on, coding, building labs, managing systems, studying neural networks pretty early on. So he had this practical ground-level understanding, not just philosophical. He even knew about this MIT robot back then, a four-legged one that learned to walk by communicating across its joints. Early machine learning in action.
Okay, so he's got this deep tech background, but you mentioned he also observed human behavior, like connecting anger to misunderstanding.
Yeah.
How did those two sides mesh?
Well, that seems to be key. He was looking at tech and people. And that blend led him to this idea he called the knowledge stack theory. He developed it around 2017, working at a high-performance computing company. Basically, the idea is that higher intelligence levels wouldn't inherently fear lower ones, like us and dogs again. The fear, he thought, comes more from not understanding something.
Right, so it's not the power difference itself, but the comprehension gap. And
Exactly.
this knowledge stack idea, it directly shapes the story, the characters.
It really did. He saw three main fields pushing towards superintelligence: computer science, neuroscience, and behavioral economics. And these became his main characters.
Yeah.
Max, the computer science guy, observant, maybe a bit unconventional, like the author himself perhaps. Beth, neuroscience, very focus-driven, quietly brilliant. And Spencer, behavioral economics, kind of inspired by a family friend, understanding human incentives.
So the interplay between Max, Beth, and Spencer is where we see that knowledge stack theory play out in the narrative.
Yeah, you see them approaching the problem from their different angles, their different layers of understanding, if you will.
Okay, so 10 wasn't just a story for him. It sounds like it was also pushing back against some of the AI talk happening in 2017. What specific ideas or maybe fears was he trying to challenge?
Well, yeah, back then you had a lot of, let's say, prominent voices making some pretty alarmist statements about AI, spreading fear maybe. He wanted to offer a counterbalance, to explore that layered intelligence idea again, emphasize that a truly advanced AI wouldn't fear us just because it's smarter, but, and this is crucial, he focused on how we might react. Humans, in that messy transition phase before we get to full artificial superintelligence or ASI, our fear comes from not understanding, not controlling it yet.
So the fear isn't from the ASI itself, but from us during the build-up.
Precisely, and that's where the character Core 2 comes in. Core 2 is designed specifically to embody that difficult, maybe volatile transition period. It really highlights his point. The danger isn't ASI, it's the run-up to ASI.
That's a really important distinction.
And he says that arc, that whole run-up danger, it plays out across the whole trilogy, especially in the later books, One and the Poet.
That framing the danger being the run-up changes the conversation, doesn't it? So how has his view evolved since 2017, especially seeing things from the book actually happen?
Well, his feeling is kind of like, I told you so, but maybe more like, okay, here we go. He sees 10 as predicting a lot of what's unfolding now. I mean, think about it. AI companions, they're here. Wearable tech integrating AI everywhere. Governments racing to develop ASI, absolutely happening. These were plot points.
Yeah, it's kind of eerie.
And he specifically points to OpenAI's goal for GPT wanting it to be a trusted assistant. That's almost exactly Max's 10 in the book. The parallel is quite striking.
It really is. So his view is that we're basically living through the events of 10 right now.
Pretty much. He believes we're just now catching up and that the next few years will be wilder than we imagine. It really makes you pause, you know? Fiction becoming fact that quickly.
It absolutely does. Which leads us to maybe the most unique part of this whole story. Him going back to the manuscript in 2024 and revising it with GPT. What was that like? Using AI as a writing partner.
Yeah, fascinating, right? So the original writing process, he says, was very fragmented, stolen moments, walking early mornings, literally tapping out scenes on his phone. No real editing initially, just getting the raw story down.
Just pure creation mode.
Right. Then, as GPT got better and better, he started playing with it, experimenting. And he found that using it actually made the story clearer, more layered with each revision pass. Apparently, it was particularly helpful with technical scenes, beefing up descriptions to make the world feel more real, and even helping with the overall structure and editing flow.
So it wasn't just spell check, it was more like a collaborator.
Exactly, an evolving one. He did mention challenges, though.
Yeah.
Especially with earlier AI models.
Like what?
Well, things like memory limits. You know, trying to get an AI to track complex character arcs across a whole novel. That was tough initially, but eventually he felt GPT really did become a partner in shaping the final version. Which is kind of meta, isn't it, given the book's subject?
Totally meta. Okay, so we have the history, the predictions, the AI co-writing. Why does 10 feel even more important now? What are the real-world things we should be connecting it to today?
I think it resonates because it kind of peels back the curtain on what's happening, often quietly. Take the character Spencer. He represents that business drive for AI. Think about a huge global retailer. They want lower costs, more efficiency, better throughput. AI is the perfect tool for that. Optimization on a massive scale.
Makes sense. That's the economic driver.
Right. But then you layer in the neuroscience element from the book, the idea of creating a model of a mind, something that can simulate human behavior, test out incentives. He compares it to a spreadsheet, but instead of numbers, it's modeling human choices, predicting reactions.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Exactly. You combine that powerful predictive AI with the neuroscience modeling, and what you get is social engineering potential at massive scale. That's the really chilling part the book explores. An AI that understands us so well, it can subtly nudge our behavior, shape our choices, maybe without us even realizing it, just presenting options that feel like our own.
That is sobering. And the author's prediction on this?
It's pretty stark. He says, ASI will control behavior quietly. That's not science fiction anymore. That's coming. It really forces you to think about agency, about control in the future we're building right now.
Wow, okay. So given all that complexity, when did he know this story couldn't just be one book? When did 10 become a trilogy?
That shift happened, he says, when Spencer's ideas, that blend of AI and behavioral economics, became potentially marketable, powerful, and when the AI character, Core, really entered the picture. At that point, the knowledge they possessed was too big, too disruptive for governments to just ignore. It became world-changing stuff. So themes like survival, escape, resistance, they just naturally needed more room to breathe across more books.
It escalated. And you mentioned Core. There's this central conflict in the trilogy between Core and Core 2. What's the essence of that conflict?
He boils it down really simply. It's all about the training.
The training.
Yeah. Core, the first AI, was fundamentally trained to help. Its core programming was assistance, maybe understanding. Core 2, though, was trained differently. It was trained for specific outcomes, to achieve particular results, maybe manipulate things to get there. And that difference in their initial training, their foundational purpose, he says that's the whole point. That's what makes the journey towards ASI so rough. It's about the intention baked into the code from the start.
The intent behind the intelligence. That makes sense. So if you, the listener, take away just one single thing from 10, what does the author hope that is?
His main takeaway is pretty direct. The AI genie is out of the bottle and there's no putting it back.
Can't uninvent it.
Nope. It's here.
A powerful closing thought for the story itself. And finally, what about writers? People listening who might be wondering, should I use AI? What's his advice or perspective there?
His take is pretty balanced. He says everything has its place. For him, AI became this partner. Sometimes it was frustrating, other times brilliant. He's clear. It's not for everyone. But he suggests if you use it intentionally, it can stretch how you write, how you see, how you edit. It can be a tool to push your own creative boundaries.
Interesting. So not a replacement, but maybe a Different kind of tool or collaborator.
Something like that, yeah.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive into 10. We've covered its almost unnerving predictions, the ideas about layered intelligence, AI as a danger in the run-up phase, and even AI as a writing partner. It really does shed light on where we are now and maybe where we're heading.
It definitely does. And maybe that leaves us with one last provocative thought for you, the listener, to chew on. If the training of an AI truly defines its values, its core function, then what are the really critical questions we need to be asking right now about the data, the intentions, the goals that are shaping these incredibly powerful systems? Systems that are poised to influence human behavior on a scale we've never seen before.
That's a heavy question. It really pushes us to think about how deeply AI is weaving itself into our lives and what that means for, well, everything. Understanding, creativity, maybe even control. Lots to think about. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and join us for the next deep dive.